Okay, so that's us. So welcome to Belfast, Wales. I'm Jonathan Watson. Today's guest is Stephen Whittier. Stephen, you're a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Black Belt. You're also the East Coast Regional Director for SBG. Is that
Yes.
correct? Yep. And you're also a trainer of trainers. You help a lot of personal trainers, coaches get take their business onto online. So thanks very much for coming on tonight. Um,
My pleasure.
just basically start off the first question. You help health fitness coaches launch the business online. How did you get into that kind of that work?
Sure. So it seems like I've been all over the map, and I have with trajectory of my career, but there was a logical progression. So um, I made the decision when I was in grad school. I was also working as a personal trainer at the time. I was started doing that before I went back to grad school, but sort of wasn't sure if I wanted to go back into academia and do that part time, or if I wanted to do that full time. And I also was diehard martial artist,
Yeah.
for many years. So I knew I was always going to be doing that too. So I made the decision as I got further into grad school, into the PhD program. I just realized that if I had to make a career choice, I really wanted to move where I found the most rewarding, which actually was in the fitness and martial arts pursuits. So I decided to do what a lot of people do, because I was already getting burnt out from training people and trying to balance that with everything else. And I kind of hit that first wave of burnout and a cap on my time and everything. So I thought the way to leverage everything was to open up my own gym. And then I could pursue my passions and, eventually have some other people working for me and manage other trainers. And so that's what I did. And, learning a lot on the fly, working really hard, super long hours, as a lot of small business owners do. Um, and I realized very quickly that it wasn't good enough to be excellent at the technical side. Sometimes there's some outliers that get away with this, but a lot of times there's some maybe geographic opportunity or some sweet spots coming together. But for most people, you have to take running your business as seriously as you take your technical competency as a trainer. And so while I was constantly trying to up my game in terms of my knowledge for what I could provide the clients, I also realized I had to put a lot of work into the business too if I wanted to be successful. So what I found was, although I did have some more leverage and we were growing and our reputation was fantastic, we were winning awards and everything, although we're a small private studio, I was hitting that cap on my time, my energy. It was taking its toll, at home, because how do you balance everything? It was very difficult. I was stressed all the time. When I knew that we were going to have my daughter, that took everything to a higher level, because now I'm like, okay, now it's not just me. Now it's a whole other ball game, right? So really thinking about the future. So basically, I had already known back then that marketing, advertising nowadays, really for the most part, is going to be, we're talking about online, right? That's what was getting the best results. We had referral campaigns that were good as well, but you can't, even if you have a good system, those can be very unreliable. You have to have some sort of inbound mechanism for driving leads and traffic. So I got really immersed in that. And as the more that I got into that aspect of business, the more I started to see the people that were online entrepreneurs. And I started to be able to sift through some of the BS online entrepreneurship with people who are really doing amazing things. And I got interested in that. What are the possibilities there? Because that seemed to be a logical way out, because I had already had the experience that if I wanted to just build more brick and mortar businesses, that the amount of investment and overhead and staffing headaches and everything was also going to exponentially increase. So I had the opportunity to get some coaching. I did it, even though it made me sweat because it was a large investment at the time, more than I, thought I could reasonably do. But I just said, I'm going to go all in. And I started to learn the fundamentals. And I just started, back then it was about building a squeeze page and getting people on your email list and then starting to serve them.
Yeah.
So I just started giving crazy value. I know everybody talks about value, but I really was like, listen to what they say, take my knowledge of the market, take everything they're telling me and mirror that back to them with the content and the support and the feedback and everything that they're looking for. And it, to my pleasant, I don't know if it's surprise, but it affirmed everything, like they're responding. So it was doing that for about, I think, 4 or 5 months of just value, driving some money into AdWords and getting relatively cheap quick clicks back then. And then people started asking me, when can I have more? What else can you do? Like, are you going to have a program? So at that point, I did put together a program, my first business to consumer online program, ramped up for a release, a launch. And the thing is, compared to what we do now with like high ticket, this is a low ticket, sub $150 product, and did the release. And lo and behold, it was 4 days later and, we're $30,000. I was like,
yeah,
well, holy shit, that actually worked. So, what I always tell people is like, although 30,000 is not some, amazing number in the online launch community, for somebody who came from where I came from and doing this for the first time, kind of figuring things out on the fly, I mean, that was a revelation of what was possible. Yeah. And so I went on to continue kind of working on that. I did a re-release of that the same year, and I had some people coming to me, asking me if I wanted to be an affiliate. So, I kind of filter through it is what they're interested in having me promote for them, going to be congruent with the needs of my list. Right. If no, I would politely say no. But if yes, I would say, okay, this looks like a good fit. So anyway, I wound up, hitting, 6 figures my first year part-time online. And that was the start of everything. And that's also how I got started. Yeah, having people approach me and say, can you help me with my business? So
yeah, and that was, so basically your whole online business at the start was all personal training, fitness training.
Yeah, so I did a mix. I did a mix for myself because what I, everybody talks about finding a niche, or a niche, but that is oversimplified. I think a lot of times you really have to take a look at a few different spaces, and you must take what your competencies are. You have to take what the market wants first and foremost, and then you have to figure out if you can match those in the virtual environment so you can really deliver world-class programming. And so each of those is equally important. And then once you have your initial hypothesis for that, I think a lot of people stop there and then they say, okay, now let's just get into what do we need to do? What's the step-by-steps? That process actually never ends. That goes deeper and deeper and deeper, but at least you have to establish those in the beginning. And the more that you can find, a micro niche within a niche, the better off you tend to be, at least starting out. So, for me, it made perfect sense for me to be able to combine fitness conditioning to a martial arts oriented crowd, and then also with my knowledge in the niche, roll in injury prevention strategies, because that was a really big hot button for them, and also just being able to keep up, with younger athletic people, things like that. So, that was a perfect sweet spot for me because I really dialed in and spoke that language, and I understood it firsthand, and I understood it from my experience as a trainer. So that was a great sweet spot.
And that was your was it over 40 BJJ programs? Is that what you referred to?
Right. Yes.
Basically, obviously, we'll touch on something in a second, but what would basically be if someone was wanting to take their business online? I know you touched on a few aspects, or like finding a niche within a niche. What would be kind of the prerequisites to successfully do that?
Yeah. So as far as that goes, the one thing I will say to people, including when someone comes to me, as has just happened, like within the last few weeks, even, I've had a couple of inquiries, I have to, I'll still help people out, point them in the right direction. But if you're coming to me as a new trainer and you haven't yet established a proof of concept in a live environment, then it would be incongruent and frankly, unethical to leap into an online programming. It's not to say that you couldn't offer, like in a situation like we have right now, because as the time of this recording, the coronavirus situation is going on. So it's not to say that if you're an in-person trainer who's still fairly new that you couldn't, if you didn't have the other resources of a gym or something like that right now, as people are home, you couldn't be doing it virtually. But in order to build properly a high ticket core online training program, basically the best digital version of you that you're going to roll out as your signature program, you really have to have a bit of expertise. That doesn't mean that you have to compare yourself to somebody else has, 20 plus years of doing this and they have a degree or they have more certifications than you. That's not what I'm talking about. You have to have real live proof of concept to say, I am an expert at getting this type of person, this type of result that I know is what they're looking for. And then you can drill down from there. So I think that's the most important thing is you have to be real. A lot of people want to leapfrog the process, and there does have to be a bare minimum of time to legitimately establish expertise.
So basically almost, trying to think of the right words, almost basically putting the practice, your craft in the real world with face-to-face clients first, and then once you've mastered that, then take it online. That would be your message then, yeah.
Right. Again, it can be limiting when people start to compare themselves too much to others, because if they look at, and I've had this happen too, somebody will put limiting self-beliefs on because they had a mentor, right, who positioned themselves a certain way, and that person had, tremendous amount of experience, and you say, I'm the trainer, I learned under this person or these other, maybe a collection of mentors I look up to, and you say, well, they have like like $150 product on the market. Who am I to go and create a high ticket program if that's all they're doing? This is, again, not what I mean, like they're just operating on a completely different paradigm. You don't need to limit yourself to that. Mastery, is an ongoing process, but what you need is a proof of concept. So you may not be a master compared to somebody else in your mind, yes, but can you repeatedly produce results for people in your target market? And you already know that, in fact, from doing it. Now you can start to ask the question about, how do I effectively deploy that into an online program model?
Okay, no, that's good. Obviously, for anyone watching, when I wrote these questions out, the world was very much a different place a few weeks back. And in the past, even in the past 2 weeks, things have rapidly progressed down a different road. I know in Northern Ireland, Belfast, there's a lot of coaches really kind of staring into like an abyss, like what to do with their bricks and mortar gym. And I'm sure this is the same in the US. What advice would you give any coach, whether it's martial arts, fitness, or whatever, to kind of survive this, basically?
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a great question, because on one hand, on a human level, we all feel this. If you have a brick and mortar business, if you have any reliance on that for your livelihood and your family, we all have that, that apprehension of what's going to happen, because quite frankly, there's always some new threat coming along, and once this passes, something else will emerge after a certain amount of time. But the way that this has played out has been, new territory for everybody. But again, I was just talking about this with some of my peers in the martial arts side. We're kind of talking about this whole Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu principle about, what's the first most important thing in this art is don't panic. Your where you put your mental energy, is extremely important. How you respond to the external stimulus. So if you panic, if you forget to breathe, if you can no longer assess and you're purely reactive, you can't be proactive anymore. And honestly, entrepreneurship is not a passive activity. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, a business owner, you need to steel yourself for adversity. And it's great when you're kind of coasting along with just normal daily challenges. But when you are faced with something like this, you have to sort of dig deep and just say, all right, where can I still provide value? Okay, to the people I serve. Where can I provide in what ways could I even provide disproportionate value? And where's the opportunity there? And so these are the questions, that I think everybody needs to reframe, because here's the thing, I'm going on, shooting a video or going live to my community for the members of my gym. And I'm saying, while you're off, while you're homebound, because a lot of them are as well for their occupations, you and your kids both, how can we optimize this situation, right? How can we coach you so that you can come out of this actually better than you went into it? You take advantage of the situation. So treating it like an extended vacation, well, there may be some value there in terms of like spending a little more time with the family or something like that. But treating it like a vacation of where you go passive, bunker mentality, hoping for the best, and you just sort of go into a denial state watching Netflix is not going to move the world forward, right? So how can we set you up with a program to create maybe a new discipline or improve on something you've already done, and increase your fitness while you're at home, increase your skills, broaden your knowledge base. So you just reallocate and redirect your energy into another direction, right? And so that's an opportunity. And our responsibility is to help facilitate that with our clients, so how we do that, that's going to be a little different for everybody. But for sure, this is where this amazing thing called the internet comes in.
Yeah.
And it gives us tools to be able to do just that.
Yeah. Because I've just been the past week, today is Wednesday, and the past few days, it's amazing the amount of people that I've seen doing. I know one of your clients and friends, Kevin Cairns, is doing online class or free classes on Facebook. People can follow along. So
yes,
it's been it's been really interesting, as you said. I think a lot of people are taking the opportunity to cash in or do really well with modern technology to reach their clients.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's good. It allows people to maybe their initial starting point is anxiety, but again, if we can kind of redirect that into productivity and into being dynamic and creative, then we can start to push into another direction that say you've been kind of uncertain, procrastinating about getting some online programming going because you fear that you won't know what you're doing, you'll come across as dumb or something. I mean, all these things that people won't cite, but if you dig down when you talk to them, you realize are really at the heart of their hesitancy. Sometimes you realize that's really at heart when people start saying, oh, that doesn't work, it's not, it can't compare to in person, everything. You really talk to them and you find out they're really just sort of trying to direct away from some insecurities they have. And it's not something that they truly are as much against as they may say. So now's the time where if that was intimidating, okay, maybe the current circumstances are more so, and it pushes you in a direction that may be uncomfortable, but then you realize, wow, I can actually do this, and it creates opportunity.
Yeah. No, that absolutely. The other question then is obviously what makes a successful online business? I know you've touched on a few points already, um,
Mhm.
but if you could summarize what would, in your opinion, what would uh, what would make a successful business or taking it online and sell online products?
Right. I think for sure, again, coming back to the entrepreneurial spirit, you do have to be willing to have that, or even if you weren't born with it, you need to adopt it because um, everything, there's not a backup plan there. You have to be in charge of you, and that's a thing where in the beginning that can seem really scary. And I think even the toughest entrepreneurs have moments where they have, like, dark nights of the soul and everything like that. But the thing is, you adapt to that like you adapt to certain other pressures. And again, like having somebody 80 pounds heavier than you, like, sitting on top of you in
Okay.
jujitsu, right?
Yeah.
And what in the beginning would seem completely anxiety producing, after a while becomes what you call fun. And
Yeah.
you learn to embrace discomfort. And so, taking those lessons, how can we apply that to other areas of life, like business? So we do that, and then you have to be consistent. And then the most important thing, again, which is where I see some of the big um, misconceptions, even mass delusions in a lot of industries, but speaking specifically to the fitness industry, even more specifically to the online fitness industry, is not being rigid, not thinking that the solution is going to be in a particular set of methodologies that you can copy and paste and deploy. And this is typically how people think, and it's often how the information is disseminated to them. It's the latest, greatest system. And I notice a lot of times people say, don't chase shiny objects, but then and what they're actually doing is creating shiny objects. So you become tied to particular gurus, step-by-step methodology. And there's a battle that starts to be weighed by one person's tactics that they then are trying to sort of undercut the other person's tactics and say, no, not that tactic, this tactic. But it's all kind of like within the frame of tactics. So my big thing is, look, in the meantime that you've already, got a niche and everything like that. But as you did like one-time niche research, now you immediately start becoming tactics focused. What about the people that you serve, right? That worksheet you filled out to say, here's my niche and my client avatar is not enough. When you start getting too focused on the individual components of, marketing and sales and everything, although they're useful, or they can be useful, and you need to have a place to start, you can actually put a wall up between yourself and your market. And my big message is you need to be staying connected in the deepest possible way to your market, even if you're an online entrepreneur. Absolutely. And I see a lot of people screw that up. So I would put a highlight on that one as well.
So it's almost like your local corner shop where maybe you go in every day, you know the person on a first name basis, and you have that rapport. So you're basically saying the same. Try and build that, even though you're online, maybe separate by 1,000 miles. You want to build that with your client, basically.
Well, so yeah, it's a good follow-up question. So more than your clients, with your prospects, with the prospects that aren't even prospects yet, right? Like they don't even know who you are, but do you understand them intimately? Okay. And the thing is, another delusion, right, is that just because you have your niche selected and you've already, maybe had some success making sales or things like that, you've got a particular tactic you've deployed, whether it's a particular funnel or it's, using somebody's messenger script or whatever, and you're like, hey, I got some wins here. but you're so tied to component thinking that when one of those mechanisms dries up, you immediately run racing to what's the next thing? Okay, what's the next object? And what you may be doing is realizing that even within your niche, there's going to be a number of different nuanced verticals, some of which are just, no matter how crystal clear you have like your client profile, your avatar created, people are going to be even within that nuanced and along a spectrum of where they're at in terms of, say, just literally what's going on in their life. That's going to affect their buying temperature. And different people, even within one niche vertical's values about, some people are going to be attracted to, are they trying to relieve a pain? Everybody else talks about find their pain points, right? Well, yes, a lot of times that's true. But if you start going overboard on pain points and you have a percentage of people there that are like, look, I am motivated, ready to achieve this goal. Now you're almost talking past them, because there's going to be a percentage of people, in a lot of cases, they don't want to hear about that. They just want to do it. They're like the entrepreneur version of, and in a lot of cases they may be entrepreneurs, right? Like there's a lot of crossover. They may be the entrepreneur version of the go-getter within your niche. So all these things are really important. And I find that most people give about 5 minutes of deep thought to their avatar, and then they just start going into tactic. And it's backwards, quite frankly. So that's one of the big things that I see, and one of the big things that I really try and go deep on, getting my clients and even my prospects to respect that, embrace that process on a deeper level as they start to create their own mechanisms.
So that would be like if someone had an online business that was geared at weight loss for mothers, say, you'd want obviously to pain point for them would be that maybe they're time constrained, that they need to be able to train at home maybe. So you'd obviously then want to make sure that that's what you're aiming at, but also I'm right in saying show them where to go, where to take that client thereafter. So once you solve those problems, you're describing the journey that they're going to go on and what the end result is. Is that right? Summarizing?
Yeah. So but here's what I mean by nuance. So check this out, right? I'll have somebody hit a roadblock with that, and they're like, oh, I learned this tactic it's interesting because a good percentage of the people I work with have actually gone through other programs, and they'll say, so I did this and this, but it didn't work out. And a lot of times what gets spit back at them is like, well, go back to the trainings, you got to keep going. All right. Again, this is not a situation where you can try and jam a circular peg into a square hole. You've got to be more dynamic than that, right? You can't just be limited to, rigidly, this guru got this result. Because a lot of times too, the other thing, like I'm one of the very few, just as a quick digression here, who's actually, everybody talks about the 6-figure trainer, has actually done 6 figures B2C. A lot of people, if they were a trainer at all, and they're not just a fitness marketer, but if they're a trainer at all, they just jumped right into B2B somehow from being an in-person trainer, right? What that means to me always is that they probably got all their systems from another B2B coach that they hired, and they've just adapted it to their niche. And no doubt they'll have some outliers in there. They'll have some wins, but again, the market is more sophisticated now. It's more saturated. So we need to be willing to roll up our sleeves and get, in there with our market, close to them, really listen to them. So to come back to what you just said, yeah, I will be able, with a little bit of experience and a little bit of niche research, to identify a set of pain points that I know my market wants to relieve. However, then you start to hit some bottlenecks, and people come to me and they were like, well, I feel like something isn't working or whatever. And I see somebody else in my vertical seems to be blowing up and everything. And then, we go deeper, and we have mechanisms to go deeper that I just don't really see being talked about much. And then lo and behold, you come to some revelations like, you know, what's interesting about this particular niche is that within this group of moms of this age who have, you know, kids at home and, you know, say busy working moms or something, there's this dynamic I've unearthed now that I've asked better questions, where a certain percentage of them so identify with their plight of being a busy at work home mom that although it's a pain point, they've actually on a kind of a perverse level embraced that identity. And it's easier for them to stay there and be able to tell people, oh, you know, I got the kids and I got work, and stay in their spot than risk maybe what would be another failure to try and make a positive change in their life, their you know, their energy, their outlook, and their body recomposition, because they've tried before, they failed. So what's comfortable and what actually gives them like a boost in their status is to be talking to their friends and family about their plight. You know what I'm saying? So like I said, these things get really nuanced. And if you're just on this sort of fundamental basic level of, I'm going to take this cheat sheet some guru gave me and fill it out and then just start deploying tactics on social media or, you know, my paid Facebook ad funnel, like you're going to run into a brick wall. And this is what I see way too much of. That makes sense?
Yeah, no, definitely. Basically, moving on. Basically, I know you wrote a book, Nothing But Net. And it became a bestseller. How did that book come about? How did you come to?
Oh yeah, so I was actually a collaborator on that book. Co-author, meaning I had a chapter in it, and actually the cool thing was, so two things. Number one, we were an Amazon bestseller on a few lists for about a day, about 5 minutes. It was a flash in the pan, and it was one of those things where, you know, I didn't walk away with a dime from it. It was a collaboration piece. So, you know, we had kind of like an anchor author in there contributing a chapter, who had appeared on a TV show and had a little bit of notoriety at the time. So it was one of those things where it's like you get on this collaboration and, you know, give you a little bit of a bump in your notoriety for that time being, right? So let's be honest, it was just to give me a little bit of visibility at the time. But the cool thing was completely not, you know, engineered, was I actually did win the editor's choice for my chapter, which was kind of cool. And because, you know, it came across well. And that was really about the story I told you at the beginning of the interview here about how I kind of went from this business newbie academic slash, you know, tired personal trainer to gym owner, to then starting my online business and that initial success, and how that led me into ultimately doing business coaching.
Okay, excellent. Do you have any plans for writing any further books at all, or at some stage, or is writing?
Yeah, you know, I don't. I'm not saying that I would count it out, but right now, you know, what I'm not interested in is being a celebrity. What I'm interested in is getting my hands dirty with my prospects and my clients, staying close to them. You know, I have strategies that have tactics obviously attached to them. There's no way not to. But what I have basically resolved to do is to not miss the forest for the trees and not have the tactics obscure my vision of my connection to my audience, you know? So that's really where my focus is at. You know, I don't need a brochure website. I don't need a book. I don't need a picture with my arm around another guru or something. If those things happen, that's great. But it's all in service of how can I help people in my market to become successful. That's it. It's what I care about.
No, that's good. I think I think that's important. Again, what you're saying is be really true to the people that you want to kind of reach out to, as opposed to kind of chasing a kind of like a title or like fleeting glory, basically. So,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, everybody, there's such an influencer culture that everybody's thinking that the way to get notoriety and differentiation in your niche is to follow the footsteps of influencers within your niche, or your industry at least. And that is one way to go, but that is an outlier path, and that's not the way that would be very much like if you took somebody like Muhammad Ali and or Roy Jones Jr., somebody like that, who likes to fight with their hands down by their side and make you miss and then exploit your overextension, and that's all well and good, and they're outliers and they're champions. But hey, if you teach other people how to do that, you're going to have a whole lot of people who are brain damaged within about 6 months, because people cannot do that, or I should say a tiny fraction of 1% of people can do that. That's why they're great. That's why they're exceptional. That's why their styles were exceptional. Those aren't fundamentals, right? So we need to be able to not look at the influencer model. We need to look, because influence will come with time. It will come with time and being able to help enough people get what they want. The main thing, it doesn't matter. I mean, I have some clients that have these, huge Instagram followings. Okay. And I have some that have virtually none. And both of them are doing just great. So if somebody has a great Instagram following, if that's your thing, okay, I'm not going to put you in a box. We'll leverage that. If somebody does not, if they have a couple hundred Instagram followers, all right, that's no problem. It's not going to be a reflection necessarily of what it is you're able to do with your business. What it is going to is how you understand and connect with your target market.
Obviously, say you started off basically your black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. If we go back a bit and maybe tell us about your earlier days and how did you get into martial arts?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because the martial arts for me and business has been such a parallel, intertwined path. In both, my main interest was being aligned to the truth. That's been the key focal point of my trajectory. I guess just to digress for a second too, I go back and I say, when you're like, what would you say makes a successful business? When you can find out where your market is not congruent with the truth, it's super powerful when you can pull them back around. So in martial arts, it was the same thing. And much like in business, it can be tough on the ego sometimes, because when you do what we call a live, meaning like functional, not theoretical, real martial arts like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai, boxing, wrestling, things like that, you can practice those safely if you have intelligent training methods, but you will be physically tested. And if your background and your status of like how many black belts you have and what degrees and everything are attached to theoretical models, and you're not honest about that, then you can have a very rude awakening. So I came from a traditional martial arts background because that was what was available to me at the time. And I had a series of experiences as I, collided with these martial arts that are now what I have trained for many years and taught, where, I was humbled in no uncertain terms, like easily. And at that point, you come up with that collision and you say to yourself, am I going to rationalize what just happened and make excuses for it? Or am I going to embrace that reality and let that open up the door to a new possibility and a new opportunity for me? And my answer was always, I feel the rub, but it's the second door, not the first, right? I now know I have to learn this. And that put me down the path, so this, I believe October, I'm up for my 4th degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, be over 20 years. Muay Thai kickboxing instructor for 22, 23. and in martial arts for more, so it's been truly like a lifelong passion, and I'm going to do that forever.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's all about being honest, being true, pursuing what is real.
Yeah, because you see, and I'm sure you've seen, there's a plethora of videos online of these kind of so-called no-touch knockout gurus, and you see them kind of,
I've seen hundreds,
yeah,
literally hundreds. Yeah.
and you see like a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy coming in, or a Muay Thai guy coming in and just completely smashing them, and
Mhm.
it's yeah. People often ask me like, how do people get woke up and how do you get woke up in that? But as you say, when you swing legitimate like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, where you're being tested every day, Muay Thai, like wrestling as well, there are arts that you can't hide in. You have
Mhm.
to know your stuff as such.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, again, it's like in every industry, there are mass delusions. Some are more apparent than others. The more dangerous ones are the ones like some I talked about earlier, where um, because there are results from, say, people who are components thinkers and have like, a particular thing that's like, oh, look, my client deployed my secret um, messenger bot tactic, and like, look, I got this person, right, that blew up. But again, if you look at in some cases that particular guru, they got their first principles, their fundamentals worked out years before, but they're not even aware in some cases, not that they're being misleading, they just don't even realize that they on some level sorted that out as an early adopter or something, and now what they're
Yeah,
teaching is not the thing. And
yeah,
so people get their eyes on the wrong thing, which is not the fundamentals, and they start becoming components thinkers, and that just gets spread like a virus. So same thing in martial arts, but um, sometimes the delusions are really easy if you're at all rational to be able to identify, which is these crazy no touch knockouts and making people twist in the air involuntarily and everything. And but at the same time, you know there's all these shades of that, there's all these nuances, because I've heard, I mean, I could give you a couple specific examples where like a professional kickboxer who is very legitimate, tested, has still fallen prey to the possibility that some of those physical things were true, and even cited, like, and I can think of one case, his personal experience with this kung fu guy. And the simple question back was, oh, he was able to do this and he was able to do this when I threw this technique. And my question was, did you ever spar? Well, no, he told me, throw my kick, and then he did. And I'm like, okay. So in other words, the conditions have been set, it's completely scripted. And as somebody who trains in an environment where there is no script, unless you're learning a drill for the first time and it's cooperative, right? But where there is no script, when you're actually sparring, live sparring, or you're in a fight, and now you've completely missed. So you've essentially, like, you're not a component thinker in practice, but you're a component thinker in this situation because you never actually understood what made you good,
yeah,
And so there's all these nuances and dangers there too. And quite frankly too, although this is a humbling thing, you get some people who go through a live martial arts training like this, and it becomes kind of a misappropriated way to feed their ego,
yeah,
as opposed to what's the word, kind of excavate their ego, like to shave off the unessentials and make them a little bit more self-aware, more honest. I've seen people that are very, very good, but they're like egomaniacs, and the better they get, the more it just makes them like out of control egos.
come like a
So it's all over the
monster.
board. Yeah, like a monster. But I will have to say that apples to apples, people in this side of the martial arts community are way more realistic and well adjusted than the people in what we call like the fantasy martial arts, that really think that they could come in and Steven Seagal, a whole room full of people, with their deadly street lethal skills.
Is it? Did you think? Because I've seen I've seen one individual who teaches martial arts, and he's quite derogatory or dismissive of grappling. And we were at a seminar a couple of years ago, and the guy was teaching just basic clinch work, and you can see the guy just. I think it really burst his kind of delusion, and he went white as a sheet, basically, like a ghost.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, you okay? And he's like, yeah. And you can see kind of the fact that he couldn't do, he had no answer for it. It really burst his bubble. Do you think it's a kind of people like that? It's a kind of like a delusion, and then they kind of get sucked into thinking that they have a mythical power or a mystical power, or what would you say is going on there? Just to say,
it is a black hole of delusion, and sometimes charisma can carry the practitioner guru figure so far down a path that they are truly lying to themselves, I think.
Yeah.
Some are just pure charlatan salesmen, right? Just pure snake oil. But in some cases, they truly need to believe this. And you see that thing where, they have a guy who they say is like an MMA fighter. I don't think he's an MMA fighter, but a guy that at least did some MMA practice or something. This is a video that goes back some years with one of these, like Aiki Jiu-Jitsu or something, like no touch grandmasters. And the moment that they're like, okay, now we're going to spar, and the guy's standing there like, his spirit fingers, and the other guy just punches him in the face, and you just see this guy like touch his face, and his eyes go. It's like, I'm reading into that. I'm not in his head, but I can only surmise he actually was like, oh my God, this guy broke through my fucking force field. And, and he had that encounter with reality at that moment. But hey, it is what it is. But when I see those again, sometimes the people seem very self-assured and charismatic, where they start to, jiu-jitsu guys. I've had some of those come into my gym, they just talk with such certainty. You almost want to believe them that,
Yeah.
And one guy come in and say, of course we had my full contact karate background, and we would have these grapplers come in, and of course we would just decimate them. Actually, we use the term decimate them with knee and elbow strikes and everything. And I'm listening to the whole thing. Of course, I could not get this individual to step on the mat, and I wasn't even doing it in like a challenge match, but hey, let's just come in and try training and everything, and wouldn't do it, which just speaks to me. It's the fear. So they're so their identity is so wrapped up in that bubble that's what happens. But I can tell you that in all of these years of martial arts training and experience, especially in these arts, in all those years, not me, not any of my peers that do what I do, in all of our schools, and literally thousands in aggregation of students, have we seen anybody be able to back up those claims in real time? Not once, ever. So there it is.
Yeah. Going back into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. How did you get into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? What attracted you to the art? And obviously you're saying about truth and about that realism. So how did you end up going into that?
Like almost everybody who was around at the time of the initial UFCs, the seed was planted then. The thing is, in the Northeast here, it wasn't available really at the time. There was only literally a couple places that, if you sniffed out, you could get it. And it wasn't even super, it wasn't totally apparent to me at the beginning, like what was the difference between Japanese jiu-jitsu and Brazilian jiu-jitsu, although everybody's talking about Brazilian. My awareness of that kind of evolved over, a year or so after seeing the initial UFC, I didn't even watch it when it first came out. It was getting those like VHS tapes at Blockbuster where you could rent them. And so I came into my first conflict with reality just from watching that, and watching Royce Gracie, in the first couple, beat everybody so easily, and looks like he was just going to get mauled, and then not quite understanding how he was making people submit because you couldn't quite see it. You didn't know what you're looking at. And then, and then especially when you read the article and he says, "Oh, my brother Hickson is 10 times better than me. He just toys with me." Like, what? So the seed was planted then. And then a little while later, when I had the opportunity to actually train jiu-jitsu, I experienced the humbling myself, where I could go from one place where I'm like the man, I'm like my instructor's main best student and one of the main instructors. And then I drive down the road and I go to my jiu-jitsu school, and anybody who's been training with 6 months can just mop the floor with me in that part of the equation, right? On the jiu-jitsu stuff. And so I'm just like, okay, I really need to learn this, because if I find myself in that environment, and I've already seen in like the UFC and everything how quickly that could change, then I'm completely helpless to somebody that knows this. And I'm not even talking about the people who are the black belts. I'm talking about somebody who's got 6 months, a year. So I just was fascinated by
that. This is kind of there's one question I wasn't planning to ask, but just interesting. What would be the difference? And this might pretty much go, this is a stupid question or a silly question. What would be the difference between that initial being a white belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to eventually reaching the likes of black belt? How would you explain that transformation? Because I know a lot of people kind of black belts have been, especially in Western culture, because you go back to the 80s, you got the Karate Kid, and people go black belt, or my uncle's a black belt in karate and stuff like this. You would hear that before about. But in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it's different. The belts are a lot. They actually mean something.
Yeah.
How would you explain that difference from that initial white belt to actually becoming a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
Yeah, because it's the difference there is that it is based by definition, and not to be fair, not everybody bases it on this. A lot of people will ascend students to the next level, like the next belt ranking, based on are they a quote unquote tough roll. And for those who don't know, rolling that's what sparring is in jiu-jitsu. So it'd be like to wrestle somebody. In jiu-jitsu, is to roll with somebody, right? Because it's grappling, and a lot of times that's grappling on the mat, like wrestling, but with submissions. So if somebody's like a tough roll, you promote them because maybe they can start to submit upper belts, or at least some of the time, and they give people a hard time. The measure that I have, and is the same by most, I think, in my organization, is more, we want technical performance, which means that if you took the physicality out of it as much as possible, like the bare modicum of physicality needed, but it's really a reliance on technique, not on physicality, which helps even the playing ground when you're trying to say, like, how do you take a 25-year-old like peak athletic guy or woman and put them against somebody who has had like a knee replacement in the 65? Well, the answer is, minus the physicality, the athleticism, strength, explosiveness. Could we have them roll together and on a technique for technique basis, as close to apples as we can get? Can they play the game at that next level? Then they're that next level.
Yeah.
And then, so that's really, the difference, because there is no theory there. It's just, can they actually do it? Right? So it's not about the demonstration. It's not about somebody giving you a predictable feed. It's, can you actually, just like in sport, could you have somebody trying to prevent you from what you want to do and trying to do something to you?
Yes.
And under those conditions, can you still be able to, defend yourself, to survive, to not get submitted, to submit them, so on and so forth. And then you see use of technique. So that's part of it. And so that makes it very, just qualitatively much different than belts where it's based on, purely your accumulation of knowledge, how to do certain techniques or how to do, kata, prearranged forms and things like that. And the other thing that's very important, but I think, again, we make the ties back to the business world, is where the more that you ascend through the ranks, the hope is that the simpler jiu-jitsu becomes. So it gets bigger in one sense, because your knowledge of how to apply technique, and you've probably seen a lot of technique, you probably at some point have forgotten more than a lot of your students have ever learned.
Yeah.
But it should get simpler, and it should get more unique to you in terms of how you play.
Okay.
But you should be able to understand the interrelationships between all the component parts in such a way that you become like a systems thinker, a principles-based thinker, rather than an individual component thinker. Because as you're coming up through the ranks, the equivalent to like, what's the latest, greatest tactic in business, in jiu-jitsu, for instance, it will be, what's the next technique? What's the next game I need to learn, right? Oh, this guy looks awesome, right? He's really good. I admire him. I want to learn his game. This person, I want to learn their game.
Yeah.
And the thing is, what happens is you wind up with people taking so long to learn it because they're not systems principles thinkers, they're component thinkers, and they're constantly, chasing the wrong rabbits, and that's just the mirror to what we were talking about in business, where it's the next technique. That's the answer. And instead, when you kind of pull back a little bit and you can just think like, what makes the engine run? What are the fundamental principles, right? So like in my organization, we collectively have a philosophy that's about, basically it's like deductive logic, as opposed to, this rigid logic, where we look at how does everything work from purely objective physical principles. Your base, your physical body alignment, your posture in relation to an opponent, and then the different pressures, which if you think about in exercise science, like what are the different, ways that the body can move? It's like sagittal plane, lateral plane. Like at this moment, how can my body move? And then what are the technical possibilities from there? And only then, and at that point, do we start looking at individual techniques.
Yeah.
And then you have to ask yourself, what are the techniques that fit my personal body type, physical attributes, way that I think, and so it's going to become individual. So you'll simplify and learn what's unique to you as you go on, and it will get easier, like smaller and smaller in a certain sense. But then as an instructor, you have to shift gears and teach the fundamentals to your students to try and get them as soon as possible, in my opinion, to be thinking as a principles-based, systems-based thinker, not a component thinker. And those are the people that when they can do that, they can get those levels of skill way quicker than other people.
So almost basically, it's like getting a big roll of cloth and you're cutting it to make a suit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
You were a trainer, and you're also a sparring partner for some of the top UFC fighters, such as Kenny Florian. How did that come? Obviously, you were in martial arts, so I'm assuming it was like a natural progression into that.
Yeah, so I've trained quite a number of UFC fighters, and then I've also, yeah, as you said, I've been a sparring partner to on some level to quite a few as well. So in the case of Kenny, I helped coach him for one camp in particular, but for most of on one particular area, but really, I got for sure at least as much from him that he ever got from me. I was more one of his primary sparring partners for years, and that came about just because we both have the same jiu-jitsu instructor. So we came up together, and I was just part of that circle. And in the other case, it's been through referral, either people who either I'm associated with as peers or students or some of, like, for instance, my Muay Thai trainer, also very in demand for the striking side, and had like a who's who of UFC fighters coming through for years. So I would be recruited to be a grappling specialist for them, but I'd also wind up doing, I'd be jumping in and doing like striking sparring with them and stuff, because, we're all part of the same the same camp, the same unit. And so those relationships basically led to the referrals to be training those guys or training with those guys.
And if for this friend who's watching, maybe because it was very easy to think sparring partner, you just show up and you fight the fighter. There's always a lot more to that. How does that work? Are you given instructions to play a certain game, or do a certain, or be maybe more aggressive, or based on who their opponent is? Is that the way it works?
Right. So that can take different forms. I mean, sometimes, it's just, it depends on the needs at the time. So there's sometimes where you're literally just going in and you're sparring, and you're just doing their thing, you're just doing your thing, and they're just doing their thing. And then you're just trying to have it be so that you're not hurting each other. But you're trying to keep, it is otherwise as realistic as possible. It's sort of open. That's where you're being a sparring partner who's a body. There's times when I've specifically come in and wanted to emulate an opponent that they were preparing for.
Yeah,
I can think of one in particular where one of Kenny's victories, he came out afterwards and he was like, "Man, you were a better version of blank that I got from blank, because we studied this opponent, their tendencies, so that it was one of those rare moments where not only did your preparation work, but it worked almost like a script, where we just went step by step through, this would be the ideal situation, and it played out almost exactly to the T like that." So I think that was, a lot just to do with like how we thought about it beforehand, but it played out perfectly. That doesn't always happen. And then there's times where when I'm coming in as a trainer, as a coach, I will take a certain amount of time where, again, I try and pull the athlete away from, because man, pro fighters are components thinkers too, in most cases, so like, this is why everybody needs another set of eyes. They need a coach. Yeah. So one of the reasons why I would be brought in is because I go by principles, and I do not try and force the athletes into a box about like, oh, let me show you my favorite techniques. No. We go on, let me see what your tendencies are. Let's correct things on sort of the systemic level about what you're doing. Let's identify the gaps. Let's make some improvements. And then we start to put everything together from there. So a lot of it is like, and not coming in and trying to reinvent the wheel, but it's reverse engineering the needs of the situation with respect to where the athlete is coming in. And, that's where we can make some leaps in their skill development really quickly, as opposed to, making it a process of accumulation.
Excellent. And you also created that, we previously mentioned, you created an online website, 40 plus BJJ. Was that something that you always had in mind as you were in the martial arts, or how did you end up creating that?
No, really, that was the inception of me moving online. Just saying, I'm going to be taking what I already have, my current assets of being a personal trainer and a martial artist and a martial arts coach and a gym owner, and how do I leverage those? So the whole thing with moving online is not to trade one master for another. You don't want to, as the saying goes, be trading time for dollars in one area with, the in-person training, and then just recreate that virtually. So we want to be able to create a sweet spot between the ideal amount of time and energy leverage for you, along with breaking the glass ceiling on your income potential, at the same time your guiding principle is always client results. So how can I accomplish leverage for me with serving my clients at the highest level possible, right? And so when you have that, then you've got something, special. You've got something there that's really built to last. And again, it all comes back to being a principles-based thinker, principles systems thinker, not component thinker, and then being able to really understand your market at a deep level, not just put tactics in front of them. And so it made perfect sense for me to have one of my iterations of this be the jiu-jitsu for and then a niche that I specifically knew that I understood and could serve were people that were kind of hitting that 40 years and over, because 40 years is not old, but in jiu-jitsu circles where you've got a lot of 18 to 25-year-old studs training, now it used to be like almost all guys. Now you see a lot of women in it too. There's a lot of things that come with that, and I understood that. A lot of the mental challenges as well as the physical challenges. So I started talking to that group, message resonated, and then I was able to create some resources for them.
Excellent. And with again going into that, what would be kind of like the most common issue a more older Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner would kind of encounter? Maybe like mobility issues or more increased injuries?
For sure. So there's the injuries, there's sometimes not just injuries, but it's you'll hear people talk about just the deep, almost arthritic, ache, like just to their bones. Like they just, I love this, but I come home just ground down day after day. When is that going to stop? Hey, does everybody else have this experience where you just feel like, even though you really like this, that you just feel like you're getting your ass handed to you and you're just getting smashed day after day? Does anybody else feel like that? People start to wonder, is this for me anymore? Am I too old for this shit? Blah, blah, blah. And then you'll see the counterpoints to that coming up, where the comments in response will be, suck it up, buttercup, or something like that. Just get used to it, like train through it, train hard, go hard or go home, team a leave, all this stuff. And so it's like you see these sort of binary conversations coming up, and this is where I can come in and again realign the market to reality a little bit more and say, let me help the first person to change their paradigm a little bit, change how they're training, change what they're doing physically, not only on the mat, but off the mat, and look at, some of the contributing factors to how you're training and also how you're thinking. And we can tweak those and we can have great benefits. And then for all you guys right now that are, the person who's pounding their chest and proud that you take a leave every day and you just bite your teeth and grit through it, or use quote unquote old man strength to kick the young guys' asses or whatever. Let me tell you, let's have a conversation in another 10 years and another 20 years, if you're even still on the mat, because if it hasn't caught up yet, it's going to. So for sure, jiu-jitsu is not for, I kind of think it's for way more people than would give it credit for. Once they actually try it, people tend to get pretty addicted. But there's no question you're going to be physically uncomfortable sometimes. Yeah. And you're going to be in situations. So in that sense, it's not for every single person. But so you do have to have like a little bit of a thick skin just to pursue it, like you do a lot of other things.
Yeah.
But you can be much smarter in your preparation and in your approach to training on a day-to-day basis, and really build an approach that promotes longevity and will also help you to increase your performance even as you age. Even as your physical capacities may diminish a bit, you can still actually get better. And like a fine wine. So
Yeah.
that's a lot of what we talk about is, injury mitigation, but also all the frustrations that go with it and how those can start to mess with you on a mental level, start to make you second guess, make you question, lead people ultimately to quit, and then to rationalize why they quit with some other reason, but it's really not the main reason. So I like to get into all those things and really help, pull some of this repressed material or unspoken material back from behind the veil, bring it to the front, and then address it and try and solve it for people. And I love it because, I literally get messages where people will be like, I had quit, not just the ones that say I was going to quit until this came across, but like I had quit and I saw one of your videos or one of your messages or whatever, one of your posts, and it pulled me back. It made so much sense. And now I'm back in it and I love it. And I'm actually like, hitting, there'll be some like new high on their fitness or their training or whatever, getting past old injuries. And it's just super rewarding. I love it.
Yeah. Basically with yourself, you've got, you've also got a lot of interests and stuff like that. And you've obviously, how do you balance your interests, obviously your own business, your own coaching, your own training, and then obviously on top of that time with your family and stuff. How do you juggle that?
Exactly. No. Yeah. Sometimes I think maybe there's something to the amphetamine freaks or whatever, but no. So honestly, it's one of those things where it for sure has been a challenge, but I am interested as I teach and coach more. I start to, as I said, with a journey to black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, for instance, I'm constantly looking for, I hate to use the term hacks because I think it's very overused, but I'm constantly looking for ways to consolidate and simplify. Because look, here's the thing. In jiu-jitsu, it's honest, right? Because you actually have to get on the mat and train and really experience failure over and over and over again in order to improve. So it's congruent that way. When you progress through the ranks, it's congruent to an actual reality or actual experience. Same thing in business. Part of what I do for my prospects and for my clients, and also what I teach my prospects and clients to do in turn for their clients, is to eliminate, shave back and eliminate as much complexity for them as possible, for themselves and their clients. So in order to be congruent, I have to be constantly doing that myself. And so this is one of the great things about coaching and teaching and things like that, is that you have a mirror to reflect back to you what you need to do as you roll it out to the people that you serve, right? So it becomes this, if it's done properly, it becomes a virtuous circle. And so to that point, where I see like I've taken on too much complexity, but I'm trying to tell others, how to eliminate it. I've had to consolidate some things. I've had to cut some things out and, be able to increase my focus, because there's no question, the more things you're trying to do, the more diluted everything becomes. And one thing I, had a mentor who basically, this isn't the first time I've heard this, and I had kind of made let's say a half-hearted attempt to do it before. But one of the things a mentor like, we're going to keep a Trello board actually documenting your entire week, every 30 minutes, honestly, exactly what you did. And then we're going to put that into a series of buckets, like kind of general buckets. You can imagine, like, here's where I did marketing. Here's where I slept. Here's where I drove, here's the time I spent eating, so on and so forth. And then at the end, you organize the buckets, and you have all your hours in a week. And then you have actually quantifiably broken down where you spent all that time. Yeah. And this is one of those things where, like, you'll see this taught, and then, like, I only half did it one time. Well, I actually did it. I went back. I actually did it. last year. And it's just like, okay, so I have room for improvement. There's absolutely no question. And now I can congruently take other people through, an exercise like that because I actually had to do it myself. I actually did the workout before I showed you the workout, like I actually did it. If you're an MMA trainer, you don't need to have fought for the UFC world title yourself, but you do have to know what it feels like to do MMA, when people are putting MMA pressure on you for real. You have to know what that's like. You need to have a sense of all those variables. Yeah. You do have to have enough to have experience. Like you have to have some level of firsthand. And so I think that type of thing is really important because you go through those processes and you can actually take a look that's not just speculative about where your time goes and where your focus and energy goes, because that's the limiting factor that we all have. There's only so many hours in the day. And I'm constantly trying to make sure that I can move closer and closer to optimizing that while still living, still remembering, that life is to be lived, but I want to be doing it to the point where my work and my pleasures are one and the same. Because I do really enjoy this. I love coaching. I love helping people grow as, in their health, their fitness, their martial arts skills, if it's from a martial arts coaching, and in their business, like their livelihood. And it just so happens that my business is helping people in those areas.
Excellent. Would you go into your time? Would you, like, for your own training, would you cycle your training around? Like maybe 1 week, most of the sessions maybe be like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and the next week Muay Thai, or would you do something like that?
Are you asking for online or for at my actual brick and mortar gym?
Just for yourself, like in your own training, like
okay, yeah. So the one thing I always tell people is, there are some exceptions, but for the most part, when I tell people, like, look, if all you want to be able to do is train, don't become a martial arts business owner. If all you want to be able to do is work out, don't become a gym owner. A lot of times that sounds counterintuitive because you hear people say, man, if I could make, 6 figures training all day, or if I could make 6 figures doing jujitsu all day or Muay Thai all day. Well, it's not exactly how it works, right? Yeah. So sometimes it has certainly been the case that, my workouts come second to everything else. But I do, again, being congruent, still try and make sure that as long as I'm healthy, not nursing any of my old injuries or anything, that I'm always trying to stay in it and in shape because I love it. I love fitness. I love martial arts. And my plan is that until I actually have to be carried off the gym floor, the mat, I'm going to be doing these things. So that's the plan. As far as how I break up between my martial arts, I do spend much more time in terms of what I actually practice. If I get in my training time, I spend more time on jiu-jitsu now. But up until even a couple years ago, I would do often close to about 50-50 between doing my striking, doing some sparring, some drilling with my guys, and doing some rolling in jiu-jitsu. And now, just based on time and where I'm kind of at with certain technical problems I've been looking to solve, I had to sort of consolidate that down. So I've been doing less sparring for a little bit and more jiu-jitsu, or less Muay Thai sparring, striking sparring, more jiu-jitsu. But again, you might talk to me a year from now and I'm back trying to figure some things out. So I'll be like in there doing some more Muay Thai for all I know. But,
yeah. Okay. So it's almost a bit like you were saying with when you were doing as a sparring partner, you were training people, you were looking at where do we need to fix. So it's kind of, you're doing the same with yourself. You're going, where do I need to kind of fix or patch up? Is that
sure. Yes. Yeah. So you're constantly working everything because unless you're specifically setting conditions about we're only going to drill this, and if we go outside those bounds, then we got to reset, which is very valuable. But a lot of times, because I have limited training time, what I need to do is find a way to add the drilling component of what I want to work on into my live open training or rolling, right? So in jiu-jitsu, for instance, when I want to work on my open guard, which is where you're using your legs as an obstruction between you and an opponent who's trying to get around your legs and get on top of you to control you. And open guard is when your legs are open, not locked around them. Closed guard's when your legs are actually closed around them. So when I want to work on my open guard, basically what I did was I would start I had some particular skills and some problems I was trying to work out. So for over a year, pretty much every time I started a roll, and touch hands with my partner, signaling, okay, let's go. And I would put myself on my back and start playing open guard. And I would work it. I would fail. I would go back and realize at what point did I fail and why? I'd work on fixing those problems. And sometimes I would just have one particular training partner's style, create a particular set of problems. So I need to work that out just with them, even though other things were working with other people. And just keep putting myself in that situation over and over again. If I had a student who, based on our skill disparity, maybe I could be half asleep and there's no way they'd ever pass my guard at this point in time, then I would have to leave a window to handicap myself. So I'd let them start to progress, and then I would recover and go back and just keep cycling back to it over and over again. So it's how do you sneak in isolated training, isolated repetition under a live environment, and so that's the way I would get my time in that way.
I know you already talked about your coaching philosophy, and I would like to touch on that just again. You talked about principles over components.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that would be your main coaching philosophy? And how could somebody apply that to everyday life, if that's possible? If that's the right question to ask.
Right. Yeah. So exactly. I mean, again, the overlap between the training life and the business life. One of the things we've talked about a lot in another overarching concept and principle that I talk about in my gym, we talk about in my coaching organization, right, is that form follows function, right? It doesn't work the same the other way around. So we bring that back to, and again, you look at this in life too. I mean, you must be aligned as much as possible, and this is a continuous personal evolution for all of us. You must be aligned to what's true, not how you want it to be, but what is true. And again, the sweet spot is to be, I mean, if you look at, so in jiu-jitsu, when the Gracies came on the scene in the early UFCs and everything, they realigned the entire paradigm in martial arts about what people thought was effective, and they realigned them to what was true. Yeah. That's not the only thing since, because there's been a lot of evolution, but that's certainly once that was introduced into the ecosystem, it could not be taken away. Yeah. It's been added to, but it was never taken away. It's not going to be, because it is what it is. And the same thing, when we look at components thinking in business and online fitness coaching and in that industry, again, when I can teach a student, a client, to go into their particular niche vertical, think not in terms of form. Semantics can come into play. They say, yeah, but if I'm getting results with this particular tactic, isn't that functional? No question. It's not what I'm saying. And plus, there's always going to be outliers that will be an exception to the rule. But the thing is, form means you're going what is my idea of systems is I've got this magic script. I've got this magic funnel, and that's the answer. And then once those things hit a wall, then I'm looking for the next form, the next easily digestible component that I can plug in that will be the next solution. Become very rigid, very attached to what a particular guru is saying, and we can't question that. Kind of become this groupie almost. And the thing is, when you realize that all of these tactics are always in the service of function, and what's function? Function is having your mindset, when we say systems, to be bigger, principles-based systems, so you can look at your market. Your market should be telling you. You got to go closer to them. You got to be more connected. You've got to have them tell you what they need. And sometimes that means, and this is nuanced, you need to look at the gaps of where are the questions that you have identified that they need to ask, but they're asking the wrong questions because they too, in some way, shape, or form, are components thinkers. And so you come in, and again, you don't want to shove the square peg down the round hole of their throat, but you do want to be able to say, hey, I see that this challenge keeps coming up, and it's kind of based on the way that you're framing the problem in the first place. Now I'm going to come in and realign you to reality. I'm going to give you the truth. And all of a sudden they go, holy shit, I've never heard that before. Yes, and that's where you win. And so, being able to coach people down that road, it's not the instant gratification of, oh, here's my super secret messenger bot sequence, right? That's like so much appeal to that. But when you can go, okay, you can do that, we'll see if it works, whatever. But remember, that's just a tool. Form follows function, not the other way around. So what we want to do is teach you the principles behind this so you can be dynamic, you can adapt. I don't want people to just take my one-to-one methodology that I give them and have it be purely this copy and paste mentality. You mentioned Kevin a little bit ago. I mean, Kevin just took a webinar framework, which I absolutely tell people to be dynamic and adaptable with. And he took that and deployed it just like I teach on the principles level, not as like a auto webinar or whatever, like a lot of people do, but he adapted it to be able to put that in front of a group of about 3,000 physicians, tweaked it to that presentation because they're all looking at certain type of programming that they can ultimately get coded through insurance and be able to recommend to their patients. How awesome is that, right?
Yeah.
And then sure enough, that just was successful. So, that's the type of thing that I coach people to do, and you're not going to find that on a friggin' cheat sheet.
Yeah.
So you know what I'm saying? So, so this is really like what it is that I find the most rewarding. We can kind of color outside the lines a little bit, think from the big picture.
Definitely. And what would be kind of obviously going on from your coaching philosophy? What would be one of the biggest life lessons that you've learned over the years, or what is there a couple of lessons, or is there one in particular that kind of sticks out in your mind?
So many, but I think a lot of it, everything I've talked about so far requires that old cliche of having the beginner's mind. It was kind of cool because I just very recently had a mentor of mine or something like kind of compliment me on my beginner's mind. And the thing is, when you speak with confidence, not false confidence, but when you speak from confidence born of, real, in your sleeves rolled up, kind of in the muck and mire trenches confidence. A lot of times people misinterpret that for the fake confidence. But what I find is that when you have that and it's authentic, it actually is usually a reflection of how much, dirt you have under your fingernails. And you can speak from confidence, not from a standpoint of stubbornness or ego or narcissism, but from being dynamic and flexible and realizing that most of your insights have come from cumulative failure. And the value that you bring largely to students and clients and things like that is to help, again, shave off their complexity by getting them to be able to be adaptable and be aligned to the truth faster and with less pain than you were able to. And I think that's really a recurring theme that I've had in every aspect of life, personal and professional.
So basically, passing on the nuggets, the gold nuggets you've learned from your own mistakes, passing them on to other people, so they kind of, it's almost like laying down a bridge or a road for them to travel along. But is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, a lot of it is, it's kind of teaching critical thinking from a first principles standpoint, meaning like you can say, I'm going to teach people how to think in a rigid way, which becomes self-constraining, but when you come from, first principles, then you're not. So the thing is where it gets so awesome and nuanced, but you can start to teach people to think from a different paradigm, which is more open. It's open by definition, not closed. And then the more that you facilitate that, the more that your own coaching and your own clients and your own students, whatever, even friends, people around you, your peers, if you've got a high quality, high vibrancy peer group, starts to reflect back to you when you're not doing that. You know what I'm saying? And this is like, I'll give you a perfect example. So this is something that, in my martial arts and fitness coaching, I think I was like, I've had for years, had it nailed, like I'm almost by definition, not a components thinker, like definitely principles based. And I was fortunate enough, like attracts like, to be able to surround myself with a lot of high vibrancy peers, other coaches and everything that, really all came from the same conclusions and same value system to want to do the same. Yeah, exactly. So, and then we bounce, we just like in the peer review process, we're constantly like bouncing concepts off of each other and learning from each other, but we all get that on a pretty deep level. And then what I realized, one of the functions of that was to be able to have this spider sense of where I wasn't doing that in the business side. And you may not immediately identify it, but you'll have this little itch saying like, something's missing, something doesn't feel right, and sometimes it's like, okay, well, I too was being too caught up in the allure of tactical methodologies, components thinking, right? I was starting to lose vibrancy with what, or congruency with what I myself know to be the way to approach things. So then kind of is like the slap in the face, and you go, okay, so let me start to reframe. Let me pull back the lens and let me start going back to first principles. And so one of the things personally that I look at when I, because everybody has performance coaches to be able to see things that you don't see, so you can take maybe some unconscious tendencies and things like that and bring them to surface. So when I look for mentors, which a lot of cases, the mentors will eventually become like mentor peers to you. But one of the things that I've always looked for is, again, not somebody who can just give me a new set of tactics, but the people specifically that I look for are the ones who can help facilitate aligning me to the truth and keeping me fresh with principles thinking, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting. I look at that across the board, whether that is people that I will bring in for seminars to teach martial arts skills for my martial arts students. Who do I select to do that? Or and what is it like qualitatively is their approach for teaching? There's a commonality across the board there. And when I look at people from different aspects of business mentorship and things like that I've invested in, what's the commonality there, right? It's people who can help me to do the same thing that I'm doing, with my own students and clients.
So I almost have that accountability, someone to be accountable to.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And again, just understanding how to continue to operate from that first principles logic, deductive logic, and when you start to fall off there on some way, shape, or form, when you start to get stuck, how can you have somebody kind of give you that slap like the first time you were a multi-level karate black belt, and you go in and a jiu-jitsu white belt is completely effortlessly smothering you and submitting you and things like that. I'm looking for the person that can be like, remember, you're starting to go down this rabbit hole and you got to pull back, and the thing is, the more experience you get, the more those tweaks become small.
Yeah.
And you immediately go, yes, good, thank you, appreciate it. And then you can run with it. But that's the type of thing where I just value that, and I actually actively seek it out. I want people to show me where I can be better. And then again, it creates that virtuous circle, so that the more that you are operating from that modality, and the more that you are passing that on to in your own coaching in whatever framework it is, right? Whether it's, being a dad or being a parent, being a coach in fitness and martial arts, being a business coach, then the more that what you put out comes back to you, because if form follows function, then you must be accountable to your own students and clients, right? So it's going to show you to keep doing that, to keep going down the virtuous path. It's quite awesome, actually. It's like what makes life worth living, that type of thing. I love it.
Oh, excellent. And just say wrap up. What's next for you? Obviously, I know everything's upside down at the moment for a lot of people with the pandemic we're facing. What's your plans for the future?
Yeah. So right now, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, but right now, I am really not satisfied with anything less than affecting a bit of a paradigm shift in the industry here. I'm going to continue to be involved with fitness, with martial arts. It's my baby, my friends, my students, and everything. But as it pertains to the side that we started talking about today with online fitness coaching, I am in the process of realigning an industry to the truth. And so for me, I'm just very interested in helping people to themselves become, principles-based thinkers, and not just become me too, copy and paste clones, in their own online businesses, but to really understand these powerful mechanisms, where they can build a more robust, connected business, still be highly leveraged, but serve, everybody says, it's almost a cliche, serve your clients at the highest level, but truly be able to do that. And that is not that is not something that you can just, again, copy a business in a box. It's something that you really need to understand from first principles to be able to create. And it's going to be custom to some extent. So there will be universal principles, but there's also going to be customization for each person. And I think what I keep hearing as feedback from my own clients is that when it comes to the back end, there's providing information and tactics and everything, but when it comes to the back end of philosophy and support, that's where I know I can stand out, and I can help people to step outside those boxes and really build something that's awesome.
Excellent. And if anyone wanted to either come along and train with yourself, or bring in for a seminar, or anything, or even get an online business up and running, how did they contact you? How did people reach you?
Sure. So first of all, you can find me on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Stephen Whittier with a PH. And then I also have StephenWhittier.com, and also tribegrowthsystems.com. Again, I'm not really into the need for like a big brochure website. I'm pretty much right to, let's get down to working, but absolutely, people can contact me through those. I'm on Instagram, Instagram, Stephen.Whittier. So however you want to reach out, I am accessible, and I do have to block my time, obviously, but
Yeah.
if anybody, has any interest in talking to me, I would love to, help you with your business. And also, for sure, if somebody has some interest in the martial arts side, I can direct you into the resources I have there too. We've got some amazing communities we're building or have built and are growing. And, we're just thriving and vibrant with great people. So I'd love to plug you in.
That's great. Stephen, thanks very much for coming on. And I say, I know obviously things are crazy, but I hope, hope everything goes well for you. I hope back where you are, and hopefully, we'll get over this whole pandemic and get back
We
to the
will prevail. Yeah. So
yeah.
it's an opportunity. It's, it can be stressful, like we said in the outset, but it's an opportunity for all of us to ultimately, test our mettle and get better. And I wish the same to you. And thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, Stephen.
All right.